Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Art Fight Podcast. I'm Joe Nolan here in Nashville, Tennessee. We're only a few minutes late. We had some technical issues, but we got them sorted right out. Brian, thanks so much for your hard work. Are you having a good day?
I'm having a great day. It's been fun. We have painters here. You know, we're doing all the, like, what's the other stuff you can do to the house to make it sane because you're here all the time? It's like, I can't look at this anymore.
You have to repaint the house at this point.
Yeah, we're doing some middle-aged shit over here. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. It's like, as I said, I mean, here I am sitting by the window here, the light streaming in. It's like a Hollywood Confidential thing happening out here in Old Hickory Village. But I'm really excited that we have two guests with us today. We a few weeks ago we said that we were going to have less guests, and since that point we've only had extra guests. So
right.
you know, such is our burden here at the Art Fight Podcast, that we have so many friends who want to be on the show. These two gentlemen have both been on the show before. They actually have a new project that is out right now or about to be. We're going to find out all the details from Chris Rini and Josh Rosenblatt. Thank you guys for being here on the Art Fight Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Chris, you were on the show. You were on the show just a few weeks ago, Chris, and then that's when we were like, "When's the book going to be done?" You're like, "Just a few weeks from now." We're like, "Just come right back."
Oh man, yeah, I was kind of sweating it up until about a day ago. I got that email from the printer. It's like, all right, ready to go. Everything is sorted. Like at the last minute, he was like, "Yeah, man, your guy's got these crop marks and the last quarter of an inch of like all the chapter pages, and your covers don't line up." I'm like, "Oh God, no!" So I emailed my guy and the graphic designer, and his name is Nate, actually, which is kind of awesome when when you do anything with MMA and then somebody's named Nate. It's really pleasant to say and write their name all the time.
Did he fucking just slap that? He slapped that manuscript right into shape.
He slapped it together. He did a great job. Yeah.
Man, so and Josh, you have sort of your book, Why We Fight, is obviously legendary at this point, whether you like it or not, and it's funny, like I'm really fascinated with your journey. I'm so glad we had an episode with you. Everybody, please go back and check that out. It was before we got all fancy pants with this video stuff, but still worth checking out. But we had touched on Philip Roth and some of that, and I ended up going down the Wayback Machine wormhole sort of this morning. And if anybody doesn't know what the Wayback Machine is, it's basically an internet archive where you can put in a website and then look at snapshots of it from various points in history. And I was going back because we were having both you guys on. I couldn't help but think about Fightland. And sort of the genesis and what brought you guys together, really, I think, in the first place, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, okay, we're talking about whatever that was, right? 2012 or 11 or something like that. But
early 2013, yeah.
Yeah. So I think about that, and I think about how I don't know. I love the idea when sort of these kind of collisions happen, and then it's not like you guys interacted in this work way and then that was it. It was like you guys were both what each other sort of really kind of needed at that time, from what the story is that I really understand about your experience, Josh, and Chris, getting your points of view on that time too, where it was like I'm here, but now what? And like I'm forced to put out content, all the time. And so here comes Chris, right? And so the story goes. So anyway, I was going back and visiting some of your stories from the earliest of times, and I ran across that Philip Roth piece, and I think that in a way that gets in an elemental sense right to the sort of core kind of commonality I think that's all had here, which is just that it's this irreconcilable, primal, yet shameful, hard to reconcile culturally, like all these things, right? It's got this sort of the early shame of being an MMA fan and not being in the bubble all the time, right? So anyway, so I really think that was sort of the point of origin for you guys, but maybe we can give everybody sort of a sense of, I mean, obviously we'll get to the book and all the things in this collaboration, but I really want people to have a sense of, we've heard both sides of your stories, guys, but we haven't really heard them, sort of in this mutual time frame, right? In synchronous time. So I want to make sure that we're speaking only truths here, but maybe we can start back with the early Fightland and kind of give people a context for how you came together.
Sure. Yeah. As I write about it in the introduction to the book, it really was a bolt from the blue. Chris really was a lifesaver, and in those early days of Fightland, like what's the best way to describe it? Like when you see in the old Far Side cartoons, when you see footsteps in the sand on a deserted island, like here was a guy. I had gotten this job to start Fightland, and I had this idea in my head that's similar to everyone, familiar to everyone who's we're talking to right now. Just this idea, like you're saying, that there's a fascination with fighting that I wasn't quite sure about. I didn't really understand where it stemmed from, but there was a belief there that it was related somehow to, and should be related to everything else I was interested in. That I thought that fighting was more than just, preview shows and the technique and the post-fight analysis, which is all great. But I wanted to talk about it in terms of psychology and philosophy and history, and as you guys do, art. But I was never really sure. I loved the idea, and I was so happy to get the job. But I didn't know if anyone else was going to give a shit. That was always up for debate whether anyone was going to care. And very early on in the tenure, when I was just desperate to find anything to write about, trying to find because I had never run a website before, and it's an insatiable animal. The website just needs content all the time. I stumbled upon a story. I'm not sure, Chris, maybe you'll remember where it was that I saw a story about Chris. And at the time he was working, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but almost exclusively with doing the woodblock work,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
And I was like, there's this guy doing woodblock paintings of great moments from MMA fights that I had recently seen or had fallen in love with for any number of reasons. And I was like, well, this guy's perfect to talk to. And a couple minutes into our conversation when I was interviewing him, I was like, I have to get this guy to work with me. It's I mean, like it really was so simpatico, and just the basic idea that you would find that you would want to talk about fighting through an art lens and the world through a fighting lens. I was like, all right, I got to grab onto everyone I can who's like this. And Chris was my guy.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I probably never told Josh this, but it took me about 6 months to make what I thought of as my like, introduction to MMA, like the wider world. I was like, all right, I'm gonna put together like a portfolio of just MMA based work. So I made it all, and then maybe I don't know a month or two before I was ready to make it all go public, Fightland launched, or at least it came into my orbit of knowledge, and I thought, son of a bitch, this is what I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to tell a story from a different angle, and now fucking Vice is out there doing it. They beat me to the goddamn punch. Oh, it was really so. It was, like Josh says, real simpatico. We were on the same wavelength. We didn't even know it. So that was really a real fun way that it worked out.
Joe, you got something?
Well, I think it's interesting that, you've really got me just thinking very nostalgically about that era. I really, felt that like Fightland was, it was really kind of perfect, wasn't it? It was kind of ideal. I mean, in a way, it kind of reminds me of sort of like in terms of the MMA content, it's somewhat similar to what they're doing over at The Athletic, or at least what they were doing before they sort of gutted most of those people. And we've had some of them on our show in the past. But this idea that, that you can have a longer form writing and you can have more in-depth reporting, and that you can talk about fighting in this bigger context. I really appreciated that about that site. And unfortunately, just like the MMA coverage at the Athletic, not that it's all gone, but like that, Fightland is now no longer a thing. And I still listen to Jack Slack's podcast, and Jack Slack was a really good writer on Fightland as well. Sure. And but anyway, it makes me nostalgic in a way for these very short periods where I feel like people like us can see our voice reflected, or you guys were lucky enough to be there creating that voice in that space, but we get to see it or somehow experience fighting through that lens, but it just doesn't seem to last very long, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know if it was born to last very long. I remember when I got fired, and I was so angry for so many months. I was just really upset that I had been fired. But at some point after after I calmed down a little bit and I got some perspective, I was like, we were never going to make any money doing it the way we were. Like, it was just never like a bunch of people like talking about anthropology and talking about like MMA through the lens, like through paintings or feminism or social issues. Like, I loved every moment of it. But
wait, this isn't going to work.
I get why they fired me now. I see it.
Well, the thing for me that I think is magic about that time too is that the whole, you had access back then. Being almost anyone, you could go to a fight and just kind of feel like you could walk up right into the middle of what's going on, or it was not hard necessarily to get great seats for, there were a lot of ways to have access. Like in my earliest days, I was like, hey, I'll photograph these fights for you if you just give me a pass and just let me in, or whatever. Not for the UFC, but for smaller promotions. And I just felt like, wow, there's this whole magical world. It's kind of like when you could see, Jane's Addiction in a club or something, you know what I mean? Before, I don't know, like there's, everybody has to remember that a lot of their favorite band or their favorite artist, whatever, it's like there was a totally different context in which they were sort of born. And you're seeing this kind of latent kind of echoes of this amplification of whatever they've become. There was something about and maybe that was towards the end of that period, but it really felt like back then access was really this key to sort of seeing a lot of this in real life, right? Which actually, one of the things I want to get to when we do turn the corner towards the book, and I just want to shelve this, but I think about all your drawings, Chris, as being through the lens of this kind of mediated state, in terms of you are looking at you have camera angles, right? And you've had to reconcile, like, where is the impression, sort of the camera angle versus my own sort of free in space interpretation, or whatever. So, but so maybe to try to bridge the gap between sort of the deep past, right, and maybe up to the present. I guess I'm just curious about both of your perspectives on how MMA's growth and the ability to perhaps access it, or when it was a little bit more secret, or when you feel like you were maybe on the more like sort of inside because you were working for these kind of sanctioned outlets in this particular way, or I don't know, whatever. Like, how has that sort of experience changed? You guys came together in that, but then you've sort of been able to sort of stay satellites, right? You haven't gone, obviously it's culminating in some of the work we're going to talk about later.
I think it's good to become part of an organization and understand what it's like to be granted a certain new level of access that you didn't have as a fan. I know as soon as I got hired by Vice, I was able to get into shows for free like crazy. I know, and it was almost hard. It was hard to figure out how to make work out of it in the way I was doing. It's very easy it's much easier, at least when you're recapping, telling the story of something with words like this is what, like literally who, what, why, where, when, that sort of stuff. It was almost overwhelming, but I do look back really fondly on that time. I went to a bunch of Glory events, a couple like live MMA stuff, a couple Muay Thai events, and I did a bunch of shows at the Javits Center for MMA expos, and I was like, I'm just going to say yes to everything, and that was great. But you realize that everybody wants a piece of you, and they want a piece of what they can get out of you, how you can give them a leg up, and how they can they really appreciate the work that I made, but they also are like, how can this, a lot of MMA managers were willing to talk to me when they were like, oh, can I get something out of you to make my fighter happy? And I was like, oh, all right, I see. I don't see a long-term future from me in these interactions. And I remember this story. Forgive me if it's a little convoluted. I used to listen to a lot of comedians on podcasts, like the Mark Maron stuff, especially. And they were talking about this heavy metal group called Anvil, and who'd been around for 30 years, 40 years, and they made a great observation, and it kind of applies to all creative people in a way. It's better to and in their case, it's better to make an album that sells 20,000 copies, but you own the rights to it 100%. You own your masters. And rather than be on Sony, sell 1 million copies, but they own the rights to all your work. And it took me a long time to figure out that, I think that's where I belong, where there is like MMA is like a slice of the population, a slice of people for whom this sport is like, yes, you know? And then within that slice, there's another group that looks at things that like Josh and I make, and they're like, yes. And I have to realize that, I don't literally have to do everything myself, but I can't wait for someone to. I was so fortunate that Josh found me and was like, boom, you need a platform. People need to see your work. But I can't be like, maybe the next Josh will be a millionaire. That ain't it. I got a taste of it, and it's like, all right, great. Now it's up to me to make what I think needs to happen. And I was fortunate enough to.
I had this vision in my head of 20 years from now, Josh is in fact now multi-millionaire, and he's just you guys sitting around being that's a 150-year-old whiskey you're drinking there, Chris. So
Congratulations, Josh. We'll have a proper drink after the show.
All I have to do is wait 30 more years.
Yeah, man.
I like that, man, and Chris. One of the benefits of having you on so recently is that I remember very clearly some of the conversations we had with you, and I remember we got off on a whole tangent about artists and having having an ethic about your work, that it's valuable and that you shouldn't give it away for free, and that's really all tied into a lot of other do-it-yourself kind of attitudes. You know what I mean? And I think you see the same kind of thing in small MMA promotions and small MMA careers, frankly, that you also see, in artists trying to make something happen with their work, or writers trying to make something happen with their writing. I think there's a lot of it comes down to those same attitudes of we're just gonna do it. We're not gonna wait for somebody to tell us we can. We're not gonna wait for somebody to show us how. We're not gonna wait for somebody to tell us it's okay. We're just gonna go ahead and do it anyway. And we're not going to be fooled about the value of it. We know it's valuable because we made it, and it's ours because we made it. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot to be said about that. And even in the we all know all of the stories. You can almost not tell me any story about any musician where we don't eventually get to the place where we talk about, and then they lost all their money because someone fucked them over. It almost always happens.
Without looking, they didn't really read it. They didn't bother hiring a lawyer.
The crooked lawyer, the crooked label, the crooked manager. There's always somebody preying on these people, and that's part of the problem, is that the business itself is set up to do that. Where if you, like you say, if you own your masters, then if any money's made, that you're getting yours. You know what I mean? So. Right. I don't know. So I'm a big fan of that idea, especially nowadays. There's so much that you can do. We can get into the whole process of how you made this book, but is this book something that you've just made on your own and you're putting it out on your own?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, see?
It's what I want to make, and it's can't wait for somebody to ask me what I'd like to do. I just got to do it myself. And the graphic designer he's a fan of my work from Bloody Elbow. We just have been kind of emailing back and forth, and I was like, hey, look, man, this is what I want to do. And
Nate, put the slap on it, Nate.
Yeah, man, he did. I've worked with great editors. I've been very fortunate. A cousin of mine is a talented video editor. He helped me do some work. Josh helped sculpt, the ideas that I had for defining moment, which was the column that I wrote and illustrated for Fightland, man, I in the beginning, I was stunned. And then by the end, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to make my artwork. I'm going to write my article. I'm going to send it to Josh. And then what goes up on the site, I am not going to recognize at all. It's going to look amazing. It's going to read amazing. It's going to be like, wow, I don't write that well, but Josh seems to understand what I'm trying to get across. I always looked forward to that. That was a great day always when that would publish. I'd be like, shit.
Well, it's good. I mean, I to be totally honest, it's the initial writing process is I always find to be the most frustrating part of the creative process. I love second drafts. For me, it really comes alive in the editing. So the way that Chris and I worked is that he would send me a story to go along with his artwork. And he had said, I'm not primarily a writer. I'm a visual artist. So do what you will with the writing. So it was great for me because it's like I got to avoid that whole first step, which is so maddening, which is coming up with the idea and fashioning it into the actual structure. And I just got to go in and just tweak and move stuff around and just give it an editor's touch, which even when I was writing my book, it's like that first draft is just, that feels impossible to me. But I can read from now till it's just, nothing makes me happier than that. So it kind of worked out perfectly in that regard, that he would send the template and then I would completely redo it.
Yeah, man, redo it. Yeah, it was really, it was like really humbling to see like what good writing is, to have an idea and put it out and then be like, oh, okay, that's what a writer would do with that. And it probably helped get me in check, not let my ego get too big, and then when we were talking back and forth about making this book, it actually came to life pretty much the way Josh was saying. He's like, hey, look, man, do you want me to write this? And I was like, yes, I do. I do. I'm like at my wit's end at this point.
So Josh, you were sort of like whatever the relationship is to like you versus your parents and say mobile phone technology, and like the frustrating thing of like you're just trying to get your parents to be able to do basic stuff with technology, and you're just to the point where like I'll just configure the whole thing and then like give it back to you. Like this is kind of what you're saying happened here. It's like Chris, you were just flailing, and then Josh came in and said, how about I do that?
Oh, 100%.
It's
he's like, look, all you want is to check the email. Let me set up, the router.
Josh, you're so benevolent, Josh. Like this could have been like a thing where like Josh is probably on this podcast right now. Like, God, like all I wanted to do was the guy a favor. And then now like I'm so deep into this book and now I've got to do these things. Like, oh my God. No, but I think it's awesome. But I guess what I wanted to say is like, if you guys worked together in the past and then now you're working together in the present, you obviously have grown a lot, refined your crafts a lot, all of that in parallel, but not necessarily in crossing these paths. I know for me, like if you go back and, get the old band back together, you kind of play the old songs, right? Like you have muscles you've kind of developed with people creatively that it's almost like you regress without even sort of knowing it. Cause it's just,
right.
I don't know, like it can cloud a creative process sometimes. So it's an interesting thing, I think, creatively that you guys are reapproaching this, right? And there's some other kind of give and take. There's a different dynamic, so I guess I was just curious about maybe the differences between sort of how it was before in that kind of way, and then sort of how you're sitting now with it, where it's like here's the stuff of collaborative work that was really effective.
I mean, that's the thing is that, I mean, I, as much as I appreciate being celebrated for my morality and my decency, I had selfish motives too, and that he came to me and wanted to sort of do it in just the way we had done the Fightland stuff, which was he had the artwork ready to go and he had these things that he wanted to write, and would I look over them and be the editor of the book? And I was at a point then. Chris has fantastic timing. I'm sort of starting to realize that now. He has a gift for cuts in my life where I'm sort of at some kind of wit's end. But I had gotten to a point. I think the book was long since out, and I hadn't figured out what I wanted to do next. And I was just flailing around a couple of ideas, and I knew I wanted to. I was thinking that I would like to do a collaborative thing, and particularly with in a visual art sense. And it's funny that I'm talking about it here, Brian, because I was watching a lot of like essay documentaries, because I was curious about these people who were combining visual arts with writing, and I wanted to do something that accompanied visual arts, and I wanted to be a very collaborative thing because I don't have a visual sense of things. And so when Chris came to me, and it didn't take long for me to connive and manipulate my way into writing them specifically and making it seem like I was doing a decent thing by relieving him of this duty. But it really was it was a giant pleasure for me, and the thing that I needed at that point, because I needed there to be, because he gave me 7 or 8 pieces and said, this is what we, these are the guys we need to write about, the fights we need to write about, and here's the due date, which is exactly what I needed. Because what I didn't need was more nebulous. Mm-hmm. Oh, I need my next idea, and that was killing me. I was getting suffocated by that impulse, and to have suddenly there was a drawing there was a painting there that had to be discussed in some way, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what I've been thinking about. So now the onus is on me.
I love that term, the way you phrase that, the suffocating from the impulse. Is that what you? Yeah, it's like the idea that you're just when you are at that sort of heavy lifting, blank slate, whatever you want to call it, stage, you have this way too wide of a view or opportunity to reconceptualize, or do I want to revisit this, or do I want to sort of create something anew in this vein or this way? Like, you have way too many options. And so to just be like, Chris is the vulture around you, just waiting for you to start. Like, Chris saw you 1 month into the pandemic and was like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
So,
the torn shorts, the long beard, the whole thing.
right.
Dragging myself along the desert floor.
Yeah,
but
man.
You will. I mean, I'm sure you guys all. I have no doubt that the three of you have had this thought many times in your creative processes, whether it's in music, art, video, whatever it is. When you sit down to do something new and you just blank slate, you have thoughts like, I need to recreate the world from scratch. I need to create the greatest thing that has ever been created by human hands ever, which is a great way to paralyze yourself into doing absolutely nothing.
100%, man.
I guess I don't have maybe quite the level of aspiration, or at least, or maybe it's just like self-belief even at this point, right? It's like, I'm not going to change the world. Like, I'm not coming from that place, but I still have my own weird challenges to myself, right? In terms of just a standard that I want to uphold to myself. And,
right.
And honestly, that's equally as difficult, right? We're our own. It's so, I'm so glad you guys are just releasing and doing. And I loved the fact that this has a clear connotation of a volume. This is a sequence that's going to happen, but maybe you guys can just turn the corner here and let's just set up the book really nicely, because I want to kind of get into maybe a visual tour of a couple of aspects of it, because we're just kind of talking about it, but now we can show. And then also, yeah, go ahead.
Would it be okay if I kind of just give you, if you could scroll through, you could just scroll through the book.
Yeah.
While I kind of give you the idea behind it, because it's funny. I think sometimes, did I write that? I don't think I wrote down what my idea was for the book, what the parameters were, or anything.
Yeah. Just happened. Well,
yeah,
the other thing too is that, and Josh, credit to you on this, and really both of you from a conception or conceptual point of view, is that my first thing that I was hit with is that this is great for anybody, whether they're really deep in the sort of MMA knowledge and all that, and you're gonna get richer details out of it in that way, maybe. But at the same time, it's not written to abandon anybody, right? Anybody could sit down and you get a baseline slice of a narrative that's the important thing that supports the visual work perfectly. Like, you guys did a lot of sort of framing and containing and limiting in a way that I thought was really amazing. So anyway, I'll do some scroll through, and then maybe you guys can give us the director's cut.
Cool.
Yeah. So there we go here.
Yeah. So I came up with that title, The Fine Art of Violence, because I always consider myself a fine artist, more so than an illustrator. That's what my training is, I guess. That's what my educational background is. I actually know very little about illustration, even though that's my job. And I have this idea that, MMA needs a solution to the to the short-term memory problem that it has, where things just get forgotten, and it has like it's got real issues with history. Somebody leaves the organization and they kind of get written out of it. And I was like, man, and the number one thing is that there's no season, there's no climax, there's no nothing, and that I think is the number one damaging thing about it. So I was like, I'm going to start drawing on January 1st, and I'm going to stop drawing on December 31st. And I'll just do the year. I'll put a book together, and it's going to be like, this is what happened, this is what mattered. And what I do is on fight nights, I'll sit down. Last year in 2019, I sat down on the screen. You can see on the left is charcoal on newsprint, like 18 by 24 or 9 by 12. And then I would rework them into, fine drawings, fine line type things. So yeah, that is, Rose Namajunas, and I'm sorry, that's Alexa Grasso and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And I feel like these a lot of these performances, they just get lost. And some of these people, they're not going to be remembered, but some of them are really going to make an impact in the world. And it's just, unless you have the right performance on the right night under the brightest possible lights, and then also nobody else outshines you, there are too many variables. And I just feel like it's not, the sport is not set up to understand itself. It's set up to perpetuate itself. And this is a way for someone should be able to open this book up at any point in time, flip through it and be like, that's cool. That's interesting.
That's cool. That's interesting. Check that out. Right. I love this.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That was the first drawing I did for the entire book.
And there was something about that one, Chris, where you felt like, because it's Paige Van Zandt and Rachel Ostovich, you wanted to not have the faces in there because you felt like that fight was sold as two hot women, right?
Exactly.
Like there was definitely a political commentary there, and saying it's gonna be the twisting up of bodies, it's gonna be the actual art of the physical art rather than these are two very attractive women and let's admire how beautiful they are.
Exactly. This is more about like, it's about the beauty of the martial art body as opposed to a woman's body. That's a big part of what I do in general. It's putting together the iconography of what MMA, what the body does. From now we're closing in on 10 years of making art about this. The most interesting thing to me about it is how at some points they just look like dancers more than they do like fighters. And there's something that's going on in these fights that needs to be shared with the world on a wider scale. Mm-hmm. There's a wider story to be told visually, and it's about the human body more so than it is about like violence, even though that is my title.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for people that don't necessarily watch or appreciate a lot of combat sports, it is something where and people should just think about it as any sort of forces at work, whether it's the body or whatever, under certain duress or compression of some sort of circumstances, it's only going to do as much as it's kind of asked to do, or as it can most efficiently be done. But there's something about because there's just so much energy being sort of forced into sort of an obvious collision, which is a fight. There's a lot of things that happen with the body that are just never going to come out in any other circumstance really at all, right? There's a galaxy of unique forms that you're probably trying to form at least constellations with.
Right. It's true. And I'm never ready for what is exciting, what is actually captivating. I never realized that, like, everybody groans when people clinch up against the fence, but that's one of the most interesting things to draw. It's one of the most, what's the word? because that's the one time you have the fence supporting someone. They can really like plow right into each other, and you see like these shapes take place over and over and over again, where bodies are like. It's one of the few times they're really locked in. Oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? They're locked in struggle, but there's an incredible amount of force, but a small amount of movement. That's what, and there's what's the word? It's the other side of kinetic energy. I think kinetic would be movement.
Static.
What's that?
Static?
Static. Exactly. Exactly. That's it.
See, he calls me for the words.
Exactly. You know how bad this would be without them.
Joe and I just failed 6th grade science in one moment.
Force.
Inertia.
Drama. This is drama, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah.
Tension.
Oh man.
Yeah, Chris, what was the decision? Like, I really do appreciate the fact that you included, everything from like preliminary sketches all the way through, more finished pieces, that seem to be more like fully realized, colored in. And what was did you think about having something that was just like Chris Rini's greatest images ever, or did you always want it to be a mixture of stuff?
Well, this was going to be way bigger and way more than necessary. I didn't know it at the time, but very much like what Josh said, like when you're like, I'm going to make something new, it's going to be a brand new landscape. I'm going to shape this like
fucking Fabergé eggs,
7 days. And now, I'm like so excited to do volume 2. I'm like sitting down, picking out fights, rewatching them. And I realize I'm going to do so many fewer fights than I did this time. But I would like to do, or rather, like the balance between refined drawings and more rough ones. I would rather make a half a dozen drawings of Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje than just one. That's really what it comes down to. The more profound the fight, literally, the more imagery I'd like to make about it. Definitely, you ever have this thing where, this is a common joke amongst artists that you do your best work on newsprint, and then once you have a beautiful canvas with your oil paints, you're just frozen in fear and the terror of having to make something great. So you only make your greatest work on like loose leaf.
That's why everybody ends up chasing their demo in a studio session.
Yeah, exactly. So number one, that's why the charcoal stuff is there. Some of those, like that, if you wouldn't mind scrolling back.
Here we go. Here we go.
Ready? It's that, the kick by, that's it right there. Perfect. I'm not drawing that again. That's it. That happened on fight night. That is Irene Aldana. That's it. I'm never going to do better than that. That's what happened. It happened the night of the fight, and that's what's going in the book. I think that this super finished, refined work, that is for, the consumer, that's for people. And then like the real rough stuff where you can see, the struggle to get the right curvature, the right line, that's for artists. And personally, I tend to love drawings more than I do finished work. And I've talked with other artists, and we all kind of, I don't want to say suffer from the same affliction, but we feel like that the life, the vibrancy is there. That stuff is, you're seeing the person's hand and their arm and their energy is in there. And then the more refined stuff is like, it sometimes it dies. Sometimes it dies on the canvas, and you don't get the story, you don't get the life, you just get like this like painstaking grasping for perfection that never comes.
Right. It's almost like even if you do get it to, if you do have one that's sort of dying on the vine, but you somehow resurrect it and you get it to a place where you're like, okay, I feel pretty good about this, I think. And then people like that a lot. It's almost like you subconsciously hold it against the person that likes your stuff because they don't know how good the original was that you're sort of still in sort of turmoil about.
Sure.
Yeah. It's such a, it's annoying, right? Just to care about shit.
Man, that's beautiful right there.
but you know what I mean? Like, it's
of course.
It's like, but it's also, how do you also manage to, in parallel, not give a shit? It's a weird life, man. It's a strange way to be, right?
It is. It's funny. Now I'm at the point where I had to kind of scroll through the book and reread it and look at a couple pieces again right before we did this, because I can tell I'm starting to let go of it now, because I basically ride a wave of like, I'm so proud of this. This is wonderful. This is my vision. I can't wait to do the next one. It's going to be even better. And sometimes I look at that book and I'm like, I can't believe I am so fucking full of myself. This work is not good. I can't believe I show it to people.
Yeah.
You know, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. You know, like I've been through the whole ringer, so I have to just let it go, and I'm thrilled about it. Oh, see this piece right here that you have on the screen? That's the Korean zombie after he knocked out Hanato Moicano, and that piece was inspired by Sean Al-Shadi's post-fight column about the enthusiasm of the South Korean population, or the Korean population, how, you know, they were just flooded the arena. And that's actually why I have the media row and the laptops in that picture. 99% of the artwork in this book, I strip away everything. No octagon, primarily because I want no advertisements. I don't want the outside influence. I don't want the distraction. I've definitely grown to grit my teeth when I watch fighting. I don't know if you guys feel this, but it's like the tweets come up. There's like ads everywhere.
Yeah.
The camera angles, they like cut them off at the knees all the time. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, am I watching a fight? You know, where is it? It's like in going on the internet and like, you know, I don't know, 1999, and just like, oh God, all these pop-ups keep coming up. You know? And so I did this because he wrote a piece about the zombies' relief, having finally won a fight after the embarrassment of losing the Yair Rodriguez fight. So this was one of the few pieces in which a piece of writing influenced the artwork itself. And I'm going to use this moment to segue and say, Sean Al-Shadi is going to be one of the writers for Volume 2.
That's right.
Nice.
If that's all right with you, I'm going to name drop a whole bunch of people who I've been in touch with. Josh. I hope I'm taking at this moment to put Josh on the spot. There, would you like to write again? But we have.
I don't know. Now that Josh is like, other writers,
here.
you could just go off with Sean Al-Shadi and do whatever you want.
Well, listen. I'm really proud of this. That I know the book is good because some people who have, you know, had sneak previews and they're going to be covering it for their websites have come back to me and be like, listen, man, I started reading this thing just like because I was going to bed and I couldn't put it down. I read the entire thing. Or they'll like email me. I'm like, I'm halfway through the book and this thing is amazing. Oh my God. I gave this book to 6 writers and all 6 of them came back and were like, yes, I want to be part of Volume 2. And I can't take credit for it all. I mean, Josh, you did an amazing job. People are responding to this with such,
That's fantastic to hear, man. That's great.
So the lineup is going to be Josh Rosenblatt, Sean Al-Shadi, Chuck Mindenhall, Julie Kedzie, Fernanda Prates, Eugene S. Robinson, and Schwan Humes.
Oh, you got Eugene.
I did.
Nice.
I did.
Going back into the old Fightland crew, huh?
Yeah, man. I've been, you know, Eugene. While he is a little bit older than me, he grew up and especially he did weightlifting in the neighborhood where I grew up, and I can't help but have some like loyalty to people who are from a certain geography.
Man, so this is like, we're just trying to even wrap our heads around this book, and what you're doing is you're using the opportunity to tell us about your next book. Like so on one hand, you probably are one of these people that feels like everything's going at a snail's pace. I'll never get this thing done, but really this should be evidence to the fact that you're actually operating at kind of a warp speed to get all these things together and and it's good to get them out before you really understand what you've actually done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be wild. I'm actually going to be live streaming the making of the next book.
Ooh, cool.
It's either going to be on YouTube or Twitch or both. I'm still kind of putting that all together. But yeah, there's going to be, I mean, I have a YouTube channel. It's Chris Rini. I have Chris Rini Art set up over at Twitch. And
Yeah.
this is the other wild thing. A lot of the next book will be done digitally. This is everything you see here is done manually, analog. It's all charcoal on newsprint or ink on paper. And this year I finally bought an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil, and I'm like, all right, guess I'm going to do this. And I'm learning as a very, very aged person how to make art digitally. Man, it is daunting.
It's a good time for that, though. I've been in the mode of learning a lot and having the sense that maybe I have the time now. Like if I don't do it now, when am I like? I'm not getting any younger, right? And when is this kind of interruption going to happen again, to where I can really justify, putting 8 hours a day into learning a sampler? You know what I mean?
Yeah, do it.
Like that's just there's no other time. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad to see people taking advantage of it. Where they can. And then, Joe you're like one of those where it's like, you just all of a sudden release stuff. Like I never even know that it's coming, right? Like you're just like wha-bam, like just quick release.
Another release.
Well,
I don't know. I think you got to, I don't know. I feel like, and I kind of, this sort of goes along with what you're talking about, Chris, in terms of like, you can get really worked up about things, and you can get really into this idea of like, I'm going to do this huge fucking, this is my fucking,
Sistine Chapel,
my apocalypse now,
exactly.
This is
totally.
my, fucking Paradise Lost, and I think that there's a fine line, especially like in rock and roll or whatever. But in lots of stuff, I think there's a fine line between caring, as we talked about earlier, like actually giving a shit and wanting to live up to what you think you can actually do versus just letting yourself be kind of lazy about it. And also on the other side, sort of approaching everything and sort of coming off in the doing of your art with a bit of irreverence and a bit of carelessness about it all. And I think that I used to get really worked up about my projects, and then I get really worked up about the release of the project and all this kind of stuff. And now it's like, I just try to like keep working, and part of working is getting stuff out there. And part of getting stuff out there is all of the, promoting and tweeting and blah, 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 and making a little noise about it so that it, maybe gets on somebody's radar here and there. And then just keep going on to the next thing. So I think it's really just about that. And with music, man, it's always like, I'm just always behind anyway. I've always got more going on than I have out in the world. So there's always something where it's like, okay, I've got to get a couple of songs out here before the universe forgets that I actually do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's good to have both. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I know for me, it's good to have both avenues available. Like I find that like when I was writing the book, having the opportunity, if I could write a story a week that would go up on a website and just something you could spit out that had that energy to it, that had that sort of like you're talking about, like it's not the biggest deal in the world. It's not the end of the world. And you could just sort of spit it out there. And a lot of times there's an energy and a blood to that kind of thing that is more thrilling after slogging away at perfection at your magnum opus for so long. And then you have the other thing where you start to feel like I'm throwing out a bunch of pieces everywhere into the internet, into the giant. Yeah,
that's true too.
That is the internet. And you start thinking to yourself, I'd kind of like to have something that I devote an entire year to. And it's, it's not really different. I find to how I take in art as much as I put it out. I mean, like there are times when all I want is to hear pet sounds and think about every move that was how everything is articulated perfectly. And he spent months on this sound. And, when they're doing good vibrations, they took one studio and then they would do it took months to do a single.
The tape around the walls.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. With the cello players and the whole thing. And then sometimes I just want to hear them sing Barbara Ann, like live in their basement with like where they're like literally playing an ashtray for percussion, because it's like sometimes you just get I get so frustrated by the perfection of it that I want someone to, like you say, give me some life, because one can start to feel, it's the same way I had to give up my subscription to the New Yorker years ago, because I just got tired of that level of editorial perfection. Like it never felt like anyone went outside the lines at the New Yorker. I was like, there's no arguing with the quality of the writing and the quality of the thinking, but there's no blood here. And you got to get some blood in there sometimes.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. That's a great way. You have to get stuff out in the world. You can't stay in like the ivory tower and be like, it's coming. It's coming. It's going to be great. It's going to be, even if it really is great, you may have spent so much time sequestered that you're incapable of like, flexing those other muscles of like communicating to people, just to get them to read what you wrote, it's good to be out there. It's good to put stuff out there all the time. And I mean, of course, striking a balance is like everybody's quest in life before they die, and they never do it, but it's smart to know that you're supposed to find that.
Well, I'm glad to hear, Chris, that you have so much affection for your drawings and the charcoal stuff, because that was my, like when I was going through the book and because you had sent me all the files, I loved the sketches and because especially with something like sport and MMA, where it's like so kinetic that you kind of want like the thing that captures as best as possible that sense of the physical energy, Yeah,
I agree, man. Thanks. I'm glad it resonates with people. I did them. I started a couple of years ago, and then I took a break. And when I did them in the beginning, I did them more as a joke, like, oh, I can make a silly picture or a joke about whatever just happened, And then I realized that, probably the best work I did in art school was like 2 to 5 minute sketches, Those are the things that, better than my finished paintings, better than my finished drawings. Those are the things that still look good 20 years later. Like there really is that life and the ability to accept that about oneself is rough. That's hard. That's not easy. It's not easy to be like, I'm best when I keep it loose. I'm best when I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm best when I'm not trying to make a good portrait. That's not what I have to bring to the world. Although there's like maybe about, there's a Ben Askren on the state on the.
Well, this is the contradiction to that sentiment, is that this was one of my favorite ones, is that there's so much heartbreak there that I think you needed, forgive me, that's totally presumptuous, but it's the kind of thing where I would imagine you needed to sit with that for a while and really make it so that the blood coming from his eye, like that there's sadness and disappointment there, and it's not just a moment, it's like a reflection of a deeper something, which is probably something you can't get when you just sketch it,
Yeah, it's hard. I've long felt that, with rare exception, the best way for me to make good art or great art is to make a lot of art. And that's really, that's my path. I wish I could say that, I could pick my spots, but I'm better off. That's one thing I learned by going to museums and seeing great masters. I couldn't help but realize that, like, they made a ton of art. And if you make a ton of art, eventually you'll make something great. And that's kind of my approach at these days. And I'm so glad that something resonates with people. And like, I feel like, yes, that is one of the better ones too,
Well, that's another thing about it, is that you never know. You can agonize over something and you never know what's going to be the one that connects with a reader or a watcher or a list. Like it's not yours anymore. Once you put it on the page and you sell a book, you don't get to say to someone, no, that's not the one that you should be affected by. You just never know which song is going to get to people.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, if you're lucky, they tell you.
Hey, Chris, one aspect of what you're doing and the stuff that Brian's on right now is really it. The Masvidal stuff with Ben Askren. I think they're both of those fighters, and the way that you capture them, I think they're a really interesting example of you really being on your game in terms of the way that you're able to capture these fighters. And I feel like, sometimes you capture them. It depends too, the way that you show them. A lot of times it's hard to recognize who they are because you can't see their heads or whatever's going on. You know what I mean? So there's that aspect of it, but it does seem like there's times where you really just are able to capture these fighters in these very stylized ways that make them very uniquely Rinian, you know what I mean? In terms of like, this is like a Chris Rini drawing, but it's also unmistakably this personality or whatever. So how do you do that? And what's the balance there for you for like how you are able to capture these personalities, but do it with your own style?
That's kind of something that's been part of the way I make artwork my whole life. I remember trying to draw like a portrait of me and my dad when I was younger. And, my family saw it and they were like, it doesn't look like him, but it's him, right? And like, yeah, you realize that there's some, like, if I'm capable of capturing like an immutable element of someone, it doesn't necessarily need to look like them. It needs to be unmistakably them. That's why I did the portraits of Nate and Masvidal. I felt like, all right, yeah, I know it. Like, these people have shapes. They have defining features. There's a thing in illustration, which I have gotten around to studying now that I'm an illustrator for my day job, where people debate the value of, are you drawing something or are you drawing a symbol of something? If I draw like a long rectangle with a circle halfway down to one side, you're going to be like, oh, that's a door, as opposed to, but I didn't really draw a door. I didn't do a good door. I didn't draw a three-dimensional one. So I'm perpetually finding I'm trying to go right in between drawing something or drawing a symbol of something. And I'm well aware of it. I'm trying to exist with one foot in each world.
Can I relay that to maybe music or something else? Just to try to, it may not be the perfect sort of parallel, but it helps me kind of understand what you're saying, whether I'm right or wrong. But a lot of times, especially when I was producing a lot of recordings where I'd be in the studio with an artist and there's a moment where the record starts to kind of like take on its own life. You got your basic tracking done, the heavy lifting of that first draft, like you're talking about, Josh, right? Just that initial sort of just getting this thing going. Like I can revise and make this better in a million different ways, right? But I just need something to kind of work with. You get this point where the artist, everybody starts to kind of feel good about what's happening, and then there's this spark of excitement that happens that in my years of producing records was like the biggest alarm bells in my head ever creatively. Because it's almost like everybody becomes childlike, right? And they're like, oh, you know what I hear, right here? Oh, it'd be awesome. And like, it's because there's just enough sort of scaffolding to now people can start to get a sense of what should be where and start. But some people are already talking about color hues and drapes when it's like, we don't even have like plumbing or like, everybody calm down, right? But there's enough there for people to start really kind of getting with it. And then even at the more refined stages of really starting to put your last overdubs on a piece of music or whatever, I can't tell you how many times I heard people say, you know what I hear right there is I hear this melody and it goes bop, 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 whatever. They'll spell it out. Like I hear it. And then you'll like, okay, well, hold on, just let's listen to it. And you listen to it and you're like, yeah, I hear that. Well, the reason why you hear that is because it's there. And it may not be overtly inferred by a really high in the mix piano part to like sort of illustrate it in this very pointed kind of obvious way, but there's still like the stuff of those harmonics and all that. So really what's happening is it's setting your brain into motion, right? To where your brain is starting to make up the distance between what it understands of what it's perceiving and what it doesn't understand. And it creates its own little sort of narrative and shadings and all that. It's the same stuff that gets activated when you read a book or whatever it is. I think in a weird way, as a side note, that's why you guys are such an awesome sort of pair in this way, is because Josh, you're so like, I'm not a visual person, but you are. It's just the manifestations of that heavy lifting from the visual side really connect here, So I guess what I'm hearing you say is like, what I feel I perceive in a lot of mediums, which is just that if you allow people like you want to have headroom on your recordings, you want to have space, you want to allow like a little bit of distance for people to kind of connect to what they're experiencing and what the intended audience or what the artist wanted what the artist intended for the audience to get out of it. There's all kinds of gradients. I love that you're talking about like I'm right down the middle, like trying to get this sweet spot between sort of depiction and making the mind wander a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. That's true. That is like, having been, a musician in the past, there is like that is like that magical sweet spot of like,
yeah,
oh, I get it. And then everybody wants to put layers on top because now we all know what the foundation and the framework can support. Yeah,
Josh, did Josh ever come into this process at some point, Chris, where you were like, oh, now he just kind of wants to do his guitar solo? Like this is the part where Josh has been kind of just holding back, but now he's like, I got something.
No, we were. Go ahead, Josh.
No, go, please.
No, I think we ended up. You know how you were saying sometimes you can regress when you get the band back together? This was the flip side of that, where you get the band back together that got cut short too soon, and instead you're like, oh man, I remember what you do, I remember what I do, and now I'm gonna just roll with it. I didn't overthink what I was sending him. I was like, bang, 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 bang. This is what I was thinking. This is why I made this artwork. And also, we weren't making this for anything other than ourselves. And then it becomes even easier. I'm not trying to tell a story for a website, for like a column that has a theme. Let's say I'm making my book, and I'm going to make these images, and I'm going to tell you, Josh, this is why I made this. And he was like, boom, great. And he was able to like, I felt I had to agonize a lot less thinking about what I was going to make, the explanation, the writing that I gave him.
And Josh, you had kind of the same pace, same approach?
Well, I was just going to think when the really fascinating thing for me, that my favorite pieces to write were because for a couple of them, Chris would sort of give me the idea behind why he wanted to do that piece, and others he would just leave it to me. But one or two of them, he had specific, like it wasn't so much about what was going on in the fight. It was about what was going on in his artistic interpretation of the fight. And there was one where it's one of the Johnny Walker knockouts from that year, and there were many Johnny Walker knockouts from that year. And he used this technique, which I didn't know there was a name for, despite having grown up with cartoons my entire life, called the smear, where he was using a smeared image to communicate quick movement over several frames. And so my favorite ones to write were where I was trying to find a way to take what he was teaching me about visual arts, like a smear, or there was the one with John Jones, the graffiti, the sort of instant. Funny, we're talking about this now. The instant graffiti versus the graffiti that's meant to last. Yeah, so that one, the smear approach. And so when I wrote about that, I tried to find a way to talk about this smear technique as it related to Johnny Walker, which was just an interesting challenge because, again, as much as I love the visual art thing, not only am I not a visual artist, but I didn't even have the language for it. So he's like, oh, that's a smear. It's like, okay, so what does that mean in relation to Johnny Walker? And it was sort of like, oh, it's perfect. Johnny Walker literally in that 12-month span and fought 4 times for a total of 3.5 minutes or something ridiculous.
Right.
It was like 3 wins and a loss in a total of 5 minutes. It's like, what could be a better analogy for what he did? Then we've got to figure out a way. We artists have to figure out a way to make it seem like he's moving through space, but it's so fast that we've got to trick the brain. And that's kind of what his career has been so far.
Yeah, I do like that one a lot. I was a little disappointed that he lost at the end. But you're right. Like even the loss, like
I had to put the one loss in there when I was writing. I was like, God, I was really hoping he had lost to whoever it was in January of next year. Yeah, I was hoping.
yeah, exactly.
January.
but the John Jones one, I really like that one as well, because I felt like the Johnny Walker one was about his performance, his career, and people's perception. But the John Jones one, like Josh said, it's about the psychology of John Jones, like who he is in relation to everyone else, and how he lets you know he's better than you, and the heads up, I'm always here. I'm always going to be the light heavyweight guy. And it kind of lasts even till today, where he left the light heavyweight division, and he's still there. He's going to loom there for decades, probably. Anyway, let me toss this out there, because I've been saying this on Twitter, that if people listen to the art fight, they can get the book a couple days early. The secret is that the book is already available at chrisrini.com. CHRISRINI.com. There's a digital download and there is a physical book, and a couple copies have been bought already, and it is a extremely limited edition. So I'm going to
put this right over your face, Chris. Look at this.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a caption, basically. What you're saying.
I'm going to sign and number each one. The first edition is done, and I'll probably do a second run, and then we might just cap it at that.
Right on.
I got a really nice a printer that I've known since college, and I'm so thrilled that I get to call him up and be like, "Will you print my book?" This is amazing.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online, Chris, if they want to find out more about your work and follow your stuff, like daily as you're tweeting it out and everything else?
I am aggressively online on Twitter.
I am at aggressively online now.
Yeah, right. At Rini MMA, RINI MMA. I'm pretty much on Twitter an embarrassing amount.
Yeah, that's where we all connected.
Yeah, I'm over at Bloody Elbow on Mondays and Wednesdays. I do a satirical editorial cartoon called MMA Squared. So I do, kind of joke about the news in cartoon format. And let me see. And chrisrini.com. My email address is there if you ever want to get in touch with me. I have a YouTube channel. My name is Chris Rini on there. And Chris Rini Art on twitch.tv.
Right on.
Hopefully that will be up and running within about a month. I've done all this with 2 children. And while you guys have been learning, I have just been suffering for 6 months.
Suffering is learning, right?
I know so much now.
Yeah. No, I mean, shout out to all the people that have procreated and then now are enduring the absolute consequences of it. I see I have a lot of friends that are single moms and doing all of the, working, quarantine, whatever, trying to do the homeschool thing and all that. I know anybody who has a human that they're in charge of has been on full-time extended duty for a good while now. It's sort of like, it's a good thinning of the herd though, because it's kind of like, oh, so now you're like, there's a lot of people that you can tell that like a lot of the back to school people were sort of like, I didn't know what I was getting into with the responsibility of having children, but I can't vocalize that or say that. So I have to just try to get out in front of whatever's, in the way of getting this human out of my house.
Josh, how have you handled quarantine?
I'm ashamed to say that I've loved quarantine. I mean, I feel awful, but my wife and I have a lake house in rural New Jersey. We've been out here the entire time. I've been reading and writing. I've been sitting on hammocks. It's terrible. I actually had the thought the other day that quarantine might be ending at some point, and I actually got a little sad. And I really feel awful saying that, but it's true.
No way. I talked to some of the dad friends that I have, and we're like, "Hey, man, do you secretly think that if you didn't have kids, this might be one of the best times of your life?" They're like, "Oh yeah, without it, everyone. If I didn't." All of my friends have kids, and I am not ashamed to say that the smartest thing I ever did was not have kids, and that's been a confirmation of that. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Understood.
Yeah. I've seen all of you guys. I've seen all my friends with that 1,000-yard stare when they realized school was not coming back. No,
I kind of knew that was going to happen. I'm over here in like the it was the shittiest place to be in
Oh yeah, you were in Queens,
in
right?
America. Yeah, yeah. I lived a 10-minute walk from Elmhurst Hospital. It was terrifying here. Like, ambulances and sirens 24/7. It was legit scary.
Yeah.
I used to have to wait outside this grocery store for like an hour online just to get in and get food. And
I've been listening to the sound of chipmunks for 6 months. I didn't even know chipmunks made noise.
Oh, man.
So, and I know we're trying to wrap this up, but Josh, I just want to ask you, like, since you've had so much free time, do you feel like you're making the most of it, or have you taken the pressure off of yourself to make the most of it, or are you at the point of where you've already conceded that like this is going to be kind of just I'm tuned out time, or how are you reconciling it?
I really had a moment about a month into the pandemic, so sometime in April, where I think I generally, I don't know if you guys have a time of day that you are generally most anxious, but I tend to wake up anxious. And as the day goes on, I sort of get better. But if I'm anxious, it's first thing in the morning. And the anxiety being, am I doing enough? Am I creating enough? What am I doing with my life? And I think that the realization that literally there was no one in the world, for a fact, I knew there was no one in the world out doing anything more interesting than I was doing, was an enormous weight off my shoulders. And as a consequence, I don't know if I've accomplished very much, but the accomplishment has been sort of an acknowledgement that that life can be enjoyable without accomplishments. So that's if for nothing else, it's been valuable in that way. Like that's sort of, it's a mentality that one should have, but I've never been able to latch onto, and it's taken a giant worldwide health catastrophe to get me to it.
That's
yeah,
fantastic. That's a great place for this to bring you.
Yeah. And Joe, I know that you're like Joe. You're sort of a good old fashioned. What do you call it? Communist? Is that what they call them, or
more of an anarchist?
Anarchist. Yeah. I'm just saying. But yeah. I mean, there is something to this idea when people talk about like the whole UBI thing. We're not going to go down this wormhole or anything, but just the universal basic income. It's like people, if you're just left to, it'll force a scenario in society that's just a better outcome because we're not just sort of all under the hammer, and we can have our Josh time, right? We can get out on the hammock, listen to chipmunks, and figure out like how can I contribute. I want to contribute, but I want to make sure I'm doing it in the ways that feel like closest, nearest, and dearest, and most meaningful, and whatever. That's productivity. It's not about like rate of stuff, right? Or just putting boxes out on a conveyor. It's something where you really want to make sure that you're not like the hustle worship thing. I'm so glad is dead, right? You're kind of it's right now like nobody's out there just like grind culture or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So
that was a short-lived moment, right?
Well, it'll come back. As they say, pent up demand. So
I was with a friend the other day, and we were taking a walk, and he said, "Man, I really hope this thing ends soon so we can get back to normal life." And I said to him, "What was so great about normal life? I mean, life was so great before. I mean, I don't know. Maybe a complete reassessment and analysis of what was important and what is important, and trying to figure that out isn't the worst thing in the world. Life, this getting back to normal life, I just sort of realized that my normal life involved a lot of subway riding and a lot of being physically uncomfortable and being surrounded by lots and lots of people I didn't know."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's there's so many things that are less static on your frequencies,
Exactly.
But yeah, so Joe, just to follow up for those that were concerned about your plants last week, how did your tomato plants turn out?
Did I talk about my tomato plants?
Yeah, here's the thing, man. The first thing that we talked about in the intro of the podcast last week was that you were telling us about
tomatoes,
because you were talking about this stuff you had to put on them. That's like you have to do it. You can't do it when the sun's out.
Yeah. You can't do it when the sun's out, but you can't do it when they're wet. And then it rained while the sun was out right after I did it. It's insane. It couldn't have been worse timing.
So we're still at a TBD on that. Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody was we were up to date on that. Well, hey guys, thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you so much.
Obviously, buy the book. You can get hand signed signature editions. By the way, if I get my copy and it's just like some rubber stamp, I'm gonna know. Like,
yeah.
Like I need to see like impression in the paper, right?
No. In my dream world, I'll actually live stream myself signing and maybe doing a little sketch on the inside of each cover. That's really what I'm hoping for.
You could make each one like a vignette where it's like it always opens with a really tight shot of like the pen on the ink or whatever on the paper.
Or no, just the cover opening up, folding over.
But then it slowly pulls out and it's always like, oh, he's on the toilet, or like it could be always. You can come up with a lot of different vignettes, right, for signing this thing. But anyway. But so everybody's got the information. It's the Fine Art of Violence, Volume 1 by Chris Rini and Josh Rosenblatt. Man, I really appreciate you guys coming on. I'm glad we got first digs on sort of the show and tell of this. And man, it's been a pleasure. Joe, you want to send us out unless you have anything you need to plug real quick.
Yeah, and thank you guys both for being here. We're really happy to see this happen. Like, again, we don't want to feel like people have to fucking, publish their great American novel during the pandemic necessarily. But every time I see friends of mine who are being productive and doing really cool work and making things happen during this time, it's fantastic. So congratulations, because that's a huge thing to get that book done. And we'll look forward to the next one. And we'll look forward to seeing the rest of you guys next week here on the Art Fight podcast. Just right before the show, we confirmed that our guest will be Eddie Campbell, the great artist behind the Alan.
Right?
That as well. Yeah, he also the reason he's coming on the show is because he collaborated with Alan Moore on what I think is the greatest graphic novel of all time, From Hell, and From Hell was re-released a few years ago. The original From Hell is all black and white, but it was re-released a few years ago as a comic again. And this time Eddie had gone back in and recolored some things and done a whole new kind of take on the look of it. And now that has been collected into like a master edition book that's just recently been reissued at the end of August. So he's going to come on and we're going to talk to the legendary Eddie Campbell about that. So you guys come back and check out more about comic art. There's a hell of a lot of violence in that book. It's all about Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper. He would have been more of a striker than a grappler. A little grappling too, though. I think he was kind of a strangler a little bit too, but it's kind of more of a stabber. That could have, if our other podcast idea we had, Brian, and I can't even remember what we were calling it, versus, right? We would pair fighter.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome.
We could have had, it was fucking awesome. I can't believe nobody listened to it. But we could have had like Jack the Ripper versus Andre the Giant.
Whoa. Or just or
a British, it'd be the British Bulldogs versus Jack the Ripper.
Or just like Hannah Cyphers or something. Like somebody, just a, I don't know. That's getting deep in the weeds.
Michael Bisping versus Jack.
Right. Hey, so all right.
Aaron Till.
We're going to sign this thing off, guys. We'll talk for a couple seconds after this and say a proper goodbye. But thanks, everybody, for listening and checking out Chris's new project and Josh's new project. This is an amazing thing. I can't wait for Volume 2. I mean, you kind of sold Volume 2 in such a way that it's kind of like I feel like I just bought like the new phone or whatever, and then like a week later they got a new, better, more, the same what you loved about the previous one, but even it's so you're killing me, man. But
you'll never truly appreciate the second one without the first one.
Well put, man.
Everybody, you're gonna want that one.
That's right. All right, so we're gonna run this outro, and then we'll see you on the other side. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.